Welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Executive. Just turn my mic, I don't know. Please note that the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. For clarity, voting is only permitted by the members who are present in the room. Any member joining the meeting remotely are able to participate in the debate but not able to vote. Other than that, the usual rules apply. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Yes, I've received apologies from Councillor Bidwell.
Thank you. I can see the members of the council. There's no other member above because we're all here.
No one's joined remotely. Everyone's in the room.
Okay, we're all here. That's excellent. Thank you. Agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. The full text for declaration of interest is set out on the agenda. If any member has a disclosable pecuniary interest or an affected interest to declare, please indicate, and I'll come to you in turn. Has anyone got an interest to declare? None? Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are members happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of January 2024?
Yes.
You are? Okay, thank you. So I will move, will you confirm the correct minutes? You've done that, so I'll move the minutes. Will somebody second that, please?
I'll second that.
Councillor Bailey.
Councillor Bailey, second that. Councillor Bailey, I second that.
Thank you. And I ask all those in favour, will you raise your hand, please, in favour of voting for the minutes? Approve of the minutes. Thank you. Agenda item 4, urgent items of business. Are there any?
No, none notified, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5. This is the Capital Programme 2024-25, and I invite Stuart McKellar, the Executive Director of Resources, to present this item, please.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the first of the reports on tonight's agenda that deals with the budget proposals. So this report deals with the capital programme. The proposals were published in draft for consultation at the executives meeting in December. There's been very little change to the capital programme proposals since then. So the only issue of note has been that the council has received extra funding from Silver Homes. That's £1.3 million related to a historic VAT agreement related to the stock transfer back in 2008. So that agreement has now reached its natural end, but there is a one-off payment due to the council, which we did receive earlier in January from Silver. So it's a capital receipt. It can only be used to support capital spending. So the proposal is set out in the report to use that to fund repairs and enhancements to the council's current housing stock. Now that clearly is a lot lower than it was back in 2008 because we're not a major housing authority anymore. However, it is still helpful, but the proposal is to use that over the next 10 years to fund further improvements to those homes. So including this change, then the capital programme for next year, as proposed, totals £13 million. £8.5 million of that is funded from the council's own resources, and the revenue implications of that are included in the revenue budget report, which is next on the agenda. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any questions, please? Any questions at all on the revenue budget? On the capital budget. None? Thank you. Can I then ask somebody to move these recommendations?
Councillor Neil, happy to move the recommendations.
I will second them. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. It's really important that we invest in the borough's assets to ensure that they don't deteriorate and remain fit for purpose for current and future needs. As the report shows, some grant funding for capital works is received from government departments for specific service areas, and other funding is secured from developers through S106 agreements and the Community Infrastructure Levy to mitigate the impact of their developments in local areas and towards the borough's overall infrastructure. This year we were also fortunate to receive an additional £1.3 million one-off sum from Silver Homes after the draft capital proposals were published in December. This relates to the transfer of the council's housing stock back in 2008. Recognising this, we propose to use this to supplement our funding for maintenance and enhancements to the council's much smaller housing stock, held now primarily to prevent homelessness. Any capital spending that can't be funded from external sources or capital receipts relies on external borrowing. In the same way as any loan, we need to provide in the revenue budget for repayment of interest and principal repayments. With other pressures on the revenue budget, we need to carefully balance the level of capital spending to meet need against what is affordable. We recognise that the state of the roads due to the weather conditions over the last couple of years is not what we want, what we or our residents expect, and we have therefore proposed an extra £5 million on works to improve highways over the next 4 years. This proposal received overwhelming support in the budget consultation. Other capital proposals that were supported by the majority of respondents were investment in the council's leisure facilities and spending on suicide prevention measures. It can be confusing that everyone active runs the leisure facilities on our behalf, while ownership of the buildings remains with the council. But this does not mean that we are responsible for ensuring the buildings are fit for purpose. But this does mean that we are responsible for ensuring the buildings are fit for purpose. If we didn't, the council would suffer from a reduced revenue income through the management arrangements. In recent years, we have very sadly seen a few individuals take their own lives by jumping from tall public buildings, and our thoughts are very much with their families and friends. Unfortunately, it is impossible to make every building completely safe and to stop these tragic events from ever happening. However, we recognise that there are some measures we can take to make it more difficult, and the capital proposals include funding for this. The proposals in this paper are in addition to the 2 special schools and 2 specialist resource provisions for pupils with special educational needs that have already received approval. These facilities are critical to enhancing our local provision and reducing the costs of expensive external placements, which is a key focus for our safety valve proposals that the government is currently assessing. Work is already underway to develop the detailed schemes. So in order to protect and improve our assets for future and current needs, I recommend these proposals to the Executive.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to as a seconder to this. In May, this Labour administration promised to take the council to the residents. We did this during the consultation period on the budget. I attended 12 different sessions in different parts of the borough to listen and answer questions. The extra funding for road maintenance was the best news received. Everyone that I spoke to also agreed the importance of maintaining our buildings and our assets. The discussion with residents also enabled us to explain more carefully how everyone active manages the leisure facilities, but they are still owned and maintained by this council. The 300k proposed for research into 300k proposed for research into suicide prevention was well received, as it will look into making our buildings as safe as possible. The budget for the capital programme was well received. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to these recommendations? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Leader. Children's Services. Supporting our most vulnerable children and young people is a key priority for Bracknell Forest Council.
I think this is on the revenue and not the capital.
I beg your pardon.
Would anyone else like to speak to the capital budget? Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Chair. If I could be forgiven the indulgence of the Executive, I think it's important to elaborate on the points that Councillor Neil, I should say, has made on the need to keep up with our demands on road maintenance. There's really 3 reasons why the roads are the way they are at the moment. The first is inflation. The cost of everything has obviously gone up, and that includes maintenance on our road network. The second thing is our variable weather over the last few years. We've had many cold spells and we've had many warm spells, and that produces a great demand on the road infrastructure. And the third factor at play is the fact that central government funding has not kept up in real terms with the demands, because it is important to emphasise that road maintenance is not just purely down to local government funding, it is a mixture of central government funding and local government funding. And I think one factor that I think is not fully appreciated is we're not just talking about roads here, we are talking about bridges, other such assets that in a place like Bracknell as a new town was quite often built at the same time and is therefore coming to the end of its usable life at around the same time. So these produce a very pressured financial environment. But I'm very pleased that this budget contains a profile for an extra 5 million over the next 4 years towards maintenance. This is a proud achievement of what is the first Labour budget in over a couple of decades. It's a testament to the abilities that we've drawn on to make this happen. It is important to emphasise that we cannot say that this will resolve every single issue, but it is a great step forward in being able to stay ahead of what is a demanding curve. And therefore I'm very happy to commend this section and indeed the entire capital budget proposal in that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilby. Does anyone else like to speak to the revenue budget recommendations? Go on. Would the mover like to wind up?
Thank you, Chair. In summary, the proposals in this report will lead to much needed improvements in public assets and infrastructure that will benefit our residents. So I'm pleased to move recommendations 2.1 A to E on page 15 of the agenda papers.
Thank you. Can I ask all those in favour to raise their hands, please? Thank you. We then move on to item 6, which is indeed the revenue budget. And I will ask Stuart McKellar, Executive Director of Resources, to present this too, please.
Thank you, Leader. So the draft budget proposals were also published for consultation back in December. Importantly, that was just before the provisional local government finance settlement, which was announced on the 18th of December, just before Christmas. So the settlement provided the actual grant figures for individual authorities rather than the estimates which we had to use to set the draft budget. So as always, there are some ups and downs in the individual grants. Those are summarised in Table 2 in the report. In overall terms, then the draft settlement brought an extra £550,000 to the council, so that was good news at the time. Members will be very well aware of events in Parliament where a large number of MPs lobbied the Secretary of State to provide some additional funding for local government in the final finance settlement. So that was finally announced yesterday, just in time to inform the recommendations this evening. So as expected, there was extra social care grant of 753,000 for Bracknell Forest. That was what we expected from the initial announcement. There was also a minor change of £10,000 to the services grant allocation announced in December. There were always some minor tweaks, so we expected that one as well. We did, however, get an unexpected gain of £268,000, and that relates to the increase in the minimum funding guarantee, which was also uplifted between the draft and the final local government finance settlements. So the proposed treatment of those grants which were announced only yesterday, it is set out in the recommendations which have been tabled this evening and I believe are now on the motor.gov app as well. So the only other major update since December relates to the retained business rates income, which is a big issue for Bracknell Forest Council. So as expected, as the report shows, we face a large deficit in the current year on our business rates income, due largely to the large refunds made in the summer and autumn, which we have spoken about before in these meetings. Now, the significance of that is that the collection fund deficit has to be included in the next year's budget calculation. So, fortunately, we have set aside a reserve to protect against these kind of large-scale business rates revaluations, and we will also benefit from an adjustment to the business rates calculation in the finance settlement, which not only impacts on 24-25, it's very bizarrely backdated also to 23-24. The reason for that is that we are currently moving into the second year of the revaluation cycle, and the figures that the government used to calculate the finance settlement for the first year were based on estimates. So for the second year, it's based on the actual position for 23-24, and that impacts both the 24-25 and backdated 23-24 finance settlements. So as a result of that, we gain almost £1 million in each of the 2 years from that adjustment, which is again helpful. So the impact overall of the finance settlement does give more flexibility than we expected to have back in December. But importantly, it's not enough to mean that the budget can be balanced without using reserves, even with the maximum council tax increase. So in terms of the budget proposal specifically, as always, some of the figures have been updated since December, particularly the up-to-date information on demand in adults and children's social care. We do that each year, so the figures have slightly different impacts on the final proposal than they did in the draft. In addition, there have been some changes made in response to the consultation, which executive members will mention when they introduce the budget. The full details of the impact of those are included in the table papers with the recommendations. So the recommendations before you this evening do include the final pressures and savings proposals, the level of the proposed corporate contingency for next year, how the extra money in the final settlement will be used, what the net revenue budget level is, and how that will be funded from council tax and reserves. So if the executive approves the proposals this evening, they will then go to full council for debate on the 21st of February. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions? I've got one question. Yesterday, with the extra funding and the final settlement announced, there was something called the productivity plan at the end of it. Can you comment on that? Does it make it life in? Do we fail or pass, or when do we have to produce that productivity plan?
That was announced as part of the additional funding which the Secretary of State made available in mid-January. I don't think at that point government had given too much thought to what a productivity plan would be. They did give a little bit more indication of that in the letters which were sent out yesterday with the final settlement. And in doing so, I can only assume that they must have actually looked at our business change plans when they were trying to develop the productivity plans, because there's a remarkable degree of similarity between both. So I think that does mean that Bratton Forest is probably well placed to respond when we find out when exactly we need to do it and how exactly we need to do it. It's a strange thing to do. It's not the first time government have introduced things like productivity or efficiency plans. As always, we will respond to it, and I expect us to compare favourably with others.
Thank you. I'm sure we will, and I'm sure it'll be brilliant. So the response. So thank you very much. Can I ask a mover now, please, to move these recommendations?
Councillor Neil would like to move the recommendations.
And Councillor Mary Templeton will second these recommendations. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It is fair to say that this has been a difficult first financial year for our new Labour administration. We inherited the approved 23-24 budget from the previous administration, and we had no reason in May to think that this would be an issue. But as has widely been reported, a potential overspend of up to £4 million was reported in the summer, which was the most difficult in-year position this council has ever faced. We are grateful to officers' hard work to introduce a range of measures to control expenditure, and I'm pleased to report that the potential overspend has now reduced to under £500,000. There are 2 months of the year remaining, so things can still change, but at this stage it does look like the outturn position is likely to be close to the approved budget. This means that we don't have to make an allowance in next year's budget proposals for a deficit being carried forward. However, many of the pressures being experienced in the current year will continue into the next, so are included as pressures in the 24-25 budget proposals. That has meant we have had to work hard to identify compensating savings. We have been open with residents about the difficult choices we face by recognising the financial realities that local authorities are facing. Bracknell Forest is in a far better position than many others and is nowhere near an S114 notice, but we still need to live within our means despite rising costs. Our approach to consultation this year has been deliberately more open, accessible and transparent, and we are pleased with the response. It has allowed us to really hear what residents think of the proposals and respond accordingly. This is thanks to Councillor Templeton's drive for a more transparent council. Our final budget proposals have removed the proposed reduction in the number of bins and reduced grass verge cutting. We still believe there is work to be done in these areas from an environmental perspective, but they are not part of our final budget proposals for 24-25. Recommendation 2.5 refers to the amendments made since the local government finance settlement and allocates funds to social care services and SEND, which is a key priority for this administration. When it comes to balancing the final budget, it is always a careful balance between raising council tax and using reserves. We have reserves and drawing some down was always part of our budget plans, but we need to be careful not to use too much in any one year. Reserves can only be spent once whilst our spending plans are ongoing. With an eye to the future and in line with almost all local authorities in England, we are proposing the maximum permitted 4.99% increase to council tax. We know this will not be popular, but it is the only realistic option if we are to protect our services into the future, especially social care services that vulnerable people rely on. Over 75% of people responding to the consultation agreed that this should be a priority. Council tax is the only income source entirely in the council's control, and whilst we will continue to lobby central government for more grant funding, our case for that is weakened if we don't take full advantage of permitted council tax increases locally. This has been a hard budget for us to bring forward in our first year as the administration, but I believe it is a fair one that has listened to views of residents as well as responding to the financial crisis in local government. On that basis, I am pleased to bring forward the recommendations in the report with the final numbers included in the supplementary paper that's been tabled this evening.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Leader. I'll get it right this time. Children's Services. Supporting our most vulnerable children and young people is a key priority for Bratton Forest Council. Nationally, children's departments have struggled to cope for many years with the rising demand on services, including child protection. The number of looked after children and those being actively supported by social care to remain within their family home continues to increase year on year. The last 12 months has seen an ongoing increase in contacts with children's social care, and the services have responded accordingly to ensure our children and professionals receive advice and support. The increases in families experiencing hardship has no doubt been a driving factor to the increase in referrals for help and assistance for families and mental health support for adults and children. For children in our care, we, like other local authorities, have seen a significant increase in the cost of providing that care and support, with privately run children's home placements soaring in costs. Often placements can cost up to £10,000 a week for some of our children with complex support needs. Whilst we continue to focus on the quality of support and efficiency in the cost of the care, the ongoing pressures on councils of providing these services to increasing number of children, young people and families is unprecedented. We have continued to focus our resources on child protection and family support for children in care and our early help and support offer, plus having a focus on developing a strategy to ensure that we can provide the right youth offer to meet our changing needs. The increase in the number of children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities who require education, health and care plans continues to rise. Like other authorities, we are in the process of reforming our educational and learning services to respond to these increases, and the SEND strategy outlines the key priorities by which this will be achieved. Central to this is the need to create additional inclusive school places in Bratton Forest and the need to ensure that we have the right workforce capacity to respond to parents, children and schools as we prepare and monitor education, health and care plans. As we've previously outlined, we will be investing in additional inclusive provision this year and advancing the plans to build inclusive schools. However, in the meantime, we need to ensure that children receive education, some of which is provided out of borough in the independent sector, which in turn increases the cost of school transport. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Does anyone else like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. It's become abundantly clear from the 330 responses to the consultation that our residents do not want to see a reduction in the number of litter bins or a reduction in the frequency that the grass verges are cut. When elected, we made a promise that we would listen to our residents, and therefore we have taken the decision not to proceed this year with these savings. The issue that many residents feared was the mess left behind after longer grass was cut. At this moment in time, we do not have the machinery to collect this mown grass, at the time of cutting it, and we do not have the available funds for its disposal. Not cutting the grass verges as often would have been amazing for encouraging biodiversity. And as our leader has explained multiple times, every inch of grass takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, combating climate change. As a compromise, we have asked for the area furthest from the road of the very large verges to be left uncut. Even though we have over 900 litter bins in the borough, litter is an increasing problem, and it appears that some people will be predisposed to litter, even if there is a bin in sight or not. We need to work together and change this culture. It is important not just for the aesthetics of the borough, but for the wildlife that live with us, and the safety of those who risk their lives clearing litter from our road network. We need to each take responsibility and do our bit for a cleaner, greener future. The 15th to 31st of March is the Great British Spring Clean, with hundreds of litter picks going on across the country. Keep Britain Tidy report that 85% of those who took part in last year's Great British Spring Clean reported that taking part made them feel more pride in their local area, and 74% said it improved their mood too. There will be more information regarding litter picks in the local area coming soon, and I've asked for officers to produce a new campaign on recycling and reducing litter, which will be coming to the executive in March. Let's all come together to make our borough an even more beautiful place to live. It might then be possible in the future to reduce the number of litter bins that we have and put the funds into making further improvements in the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Chair. In line with other councils, Bracknell Forest continues to experience additional demands for its services. The cost of living crisis exacerbated the impact of COVID for many residents. We saw higher numbers of residents experiencing financial hardship, many being unable to pay mortgages as interest rates and mortgage rates increased. Others were unable to pay fuel bills as prices increased exponentially. We saw residents who had never needed to access support from the local authority requiring assistance with their growing financial hardship. As a result, demand for discretionary housing payments, which are a vital support to residents to maintain their tenancy and avoid homelessness, far exceeded the level of the funds available. The COVID relief measures being removed by central government brought the full impact of the pandemic to many Bracknell Forest residents, resulting in many needing to seek social housing as their financial situation greatly reduced. This, combined with the effects of the cost of living crisis, which is leading to more landlords evicting tenants as they sell properties due to being unable to pay higher mortgages or increasing rents, rendering private rental unaffordable, has led to the number of residents in the housing register and in temporary accommodation increasing. The increase in those needing to move to Bracknell Forest, either due to them fleeing domestic abuse or as a result of government migration schemes, has also increased the demand on housing in recent years. Homelessness applications in Bracknell at the end of December 2023 have already exceeded the number of applications in the previous year. In 2022 to 23, we received 1,209 homeless applications for the whole year, compared to 1,229 in the first 9 months of this financial year. The demand for adult social care services continues to rise with an increased number of older people and those with complex care needs. As the number of people with social care needs live longer and with more complex conditions, the Council continues to focus on supporting individuals to live actively in their communities and with the care and support that they need. While demand for social care services has risen in recent years, the cost of delivering care in residential and nursing settings and at home have soared, again putting unprecedented pressures on the council budgets. We aim to support people to remain at home and embrace the latest technologies. Supporting people with complex needs as they are discharged from hospital is increasingly becoming a large part of the work that we do. We are supporting an increased number of people to leave hospital with assistance and support, reablement and care as needed. Whilst we have had some progress in securing permanent social workers to deliver these key services, we continue to rely on agency staff to deliver our core services.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would like to speak in support of the budget. Firstly, I'd like to thank you as leader of the council for your hard work and dedication in support of the budget consultation. Over 300 residents have responded to the proposals, many you have spoken to yourself. I would like to address the proposed changes to the library services and our customer services team. This is the area where we have had the most feedback, and I have to say the most misinformation, perhaps bordering on disinformation. I know that we live in an era where feelings can sometimes be seen as a replacement for facts, but let me be the first to say the facts of the matter. We must keep in mind that each of these changes directly impacts upon our residents and our hard-working staff. We all, regardless of which party forms the administration, have a duty to say what is proposed and what is not. This administration has stated that we will be transparent and clear on the decisions that we make, and the proposals today demonstrate these principles. It is sad to report that staff in the library services have been upset with things that are simply not true. For example, we are closing libraries. None of the proposals in the papers say this. Therefore, let me assure the executive this is not what is being proposed. What is being proposed following the consultation is to merge the customer services team with the library team. From this new service over the next 2 years, it is proposed that 4 posts are deleted. These posts are all of management positions, and no frontline staff will be affected. As part of the proposal, we are seeking to move from the current library offer to a community hub-based library offer. Colleagues, this will expand our community hubs, adding library sites to a new way of serving our community. With regard to the home library services, we have agreed to take this year to review how we can keep meeting the needs of the 110 customers it services, while still making savings of around £40,000. We have taken on board the offer of using the voluntary sector and that of better coordination with social care services to meet the needs of these customers. Regarding this new type of library offer, this will increase the number of hours that residents can access these sites. It will maximize the use of these important community assets beyond the current way of working. It will not see a reduction in the number of hours library assistants are available to help our customers. Given that sites are already supported by volunteers, we seek to empower leaders of reading clubs, chess clubs, sewing clubs, and others to have greater access to these facilities without increasing the management costs. These proposals are the first step in moving towards a new model, focusing on delivering better access to council services while protecting these sites as places where communities can come together. Chair, when I joined the council, I made it clear that I would not play politics with people's lives. I would look at the facts, I would get people's views, and I would present in a straightforward way what I believe was the right thing to do. This, Chair, is the right thing to do. In a tough budget round, where hard choices must be made, every budget area must contribute. This proposal reduces costs with the least impact on the residents of the borough, and so I seek the support from the executive for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by echoing the thanks that Councillor Jeffreys has given. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers for their hard and incredible work in what has been the toughest financial situation this council has ever had to face. I would also like to give thanks to the leader of the council and all councillors in creating a new paradigm for this council, one of greater engagement with residents. We promised early on that this would be a council that would work with people, and I think the lengths that we've taken to not just have our consultation online, but out into the community, engaging directly with residents is a testament to that. But on that point, I'd offer the greatest thanks to residents for engaging with this process. There has been a quite unprecedented level of engagement with this consultation. And whilst I understand that there has been scepticism in the past about the worth of consultations, I think the fact that there have been changes made on the basis of the information that we have received is a testament to how seriously these things were taken. So I just want to say that off the mark first. I think one area that I would like to focus on in this budget is the issue of street lighting. And I think I'd like to start off by being very clear about exactly what is being proposed. There are some councils in this country which are in a very difficult financial position and have had to look to turn off their street lighting in certain parts. This is not what is being proposed in this budget. What is being proposed is a dimming of street lights in nighttime hours. And it is not a blanket level of dimming throughout the whole night. There is a variation in how these lights are dimmed. They will remain at the brighter level in the early hours of the night, at this beginning, in the late evening, and then in the early hours, the later hours of the morning, when people are more likely to be in need of moving around, with the more pronounced dimming to be taking place in the middle of the night. Overall, we're looking at a 10% level of dimming in these areas. But it is also important to touch on the fact that there are clear things that will not be adjusted in this period. We are not looking at, for example, touching the brightness of lights in underpasses, which I think has been something that has been said on social media, and it's important for me to take this opportunity to say that is not what is being included as part of these proposals. There are also major roads that are frankly not at a level where we'd be looking to dim them further. So it is important to understand that certain impressions of what exactly we're proposing here are not as simple as are not as quite as they may be coming across right now, and I hope that this has been an opportunity to convey exactly what it is that we're proposing. It is unavoidable to not touch on the fact that we are making this decision in the context of a very tough financial situation. If the finances were in a different place, different decisions might have been made. But quite clearly, we are living in an unprecedented national situation for local government finances, and to not make a tough decision here is to make a tough decision somewhere else in our council budget, potentially somewhere else that will infect people's lives in a more dramatic fashion. So I therefore say that we must push forward on this aspect, and there is a silver lining to this. It enables the council to be able to work more towards its carbon saving goals. So I don't want this to be presented as a negative thing. There are benefits to this decision. And in that respect, I therefore commend this revenue budget for the approval of the executive. And on the final aspect, I would just make a quick comment on the aspect of council tax. This is not, as Councillor Neil said, a decision that we have taken lightly. We all have to pay council tax around this table. None of us are particularly happy about the idea of a 4.99% increase, and I know that I'll receive that message on the doorstep. But this is not a council in a singular financial position. I would be very surprised to see any council that is in our sort of position not increase the council tax by the full rate. This is a time when central government and local government needs to come more together, because this is not a problem that's just affecting one council here or there. It is affecting councils across the breadth of our country. So in that last respect, I again say that I commend this budget for approval by the executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilby. I'd just like to say my bit now, and the reason I wanted a public consultation to take it out was in my 13 years as Bracknell Forest councillor, I've always been really disappointed by the number of previous responses to budget consultations, usually 2, of which 1 was my own. So this year, when we received 333 responses, I'm really elated by this. And I think we had valuable feedback by just standing there and talking to people and explaining. And many people didn't even realise they could respond to a consultation on this budget, and yet they've lived in the borough for years and years and years. I was also able to, because I was out there, to correct the false information that were being given about libraries being closed and hours reduced. So the consultation came in online. The consultation was out there on the street. We've listened to the residents. We've listened to the feedback from the overview and scrutiny. We've listened to the feedback from the opposition groups. We have removed the proposal to reduce the number of bins as a result of this, and removed the proposal to reduce the grass verge cutting, which I would personally have loved to have kept. We've also, the dimming of the just 10% of street lights is to be kept, but this will remove 100 tonnes of carbon and over 134,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. Raising the council tax by 4.99% was a hard decision to make when we are still in the midst of cost of living crisis, high utility bills, rents, mortgages and food bills. However, we need to ensure we can afford all the services we have to provide this year and in the future. We fully understand that this will affect some households harder than others. We are therefore proposing a £75 discount from council tax bills for lowest income working age householders, funded from our reserves. This proposal received 70% support in the consultation process. Everybody recognises that there is a financial crisis in local government because of years of underspending by central government. We have to find ways of paying for all the services we provide, and this necessitates raising council tax. We have proposed a budget, listened to residents, adapted the proposals. It's a fair budget, and I second the recommendation. Would the mover like to wind up? The winder like to move up? Would the mover like to wind up?
Thank you, Chair. In summary, this has been a tough budget, but it's ultimately one that has been taken to residents where we have listened and amended our proposals in line with what we have heard. Increasing council tax by 4.99% equates to £1.47 a week on a Band D property, and whilst a difficult decision, is the only income source entirely within our control against a backdrop of crisis in local government funding. We of course also include support for low-income working households. Therefore, I am proud to recommend to Council a budget and council tax level for 24-25 as detailed in recommendations 2.1 to 2.13.
Thank you. Can I ask all those in favour to raise and vote, please? Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the creation of a joint committee of Berkshire Prosperity Board, being presented to us by Andrew Hunter, Executive Director of Place, Planning and Regeneration, to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to seek recommendation from the Executive to Council to establish a joint committee which will be known as the Berkshire Prosperity Board. The joint committee would be established to drive economic prosperity in the Berkshire area, working collectively and collaboratively with the 5 other Berkshire authorities. In the report, it sets out the aims and ambitions of the board, and these include creating a stronger voice for Berkshire with central government, driving forward inclusive, green and sustainable economic growth, and improving productivity through collaboration. The report and the appendices provide details of how the committee will operate and focuses on the 6 key themes that will be led by each of the councils. This includes sector development, affordable housing, adult and skills education, net zero, health and inequalities, and infrastructure. The report also sets out how the councils will interact with the local enterprise partnership and will deliver the core functions that are now required to be delivered by local authorities. They were previously provided by the local enterprise partnership. We will be doing those now. Initially, the board will be run using resources from across the Berkshire area, with Bracknell Forest providing democratic functions to the main meetings of the board. Each council will also be contributing funding towards the running of the board over the first year of operation. Each of the councils will be taking a similar report through to their executives or their cabinets, and then we'll be recommending that we enter into this arrangement through their council meetings. The intention is that the first meeting of the board will take place in spring 2024. The appendices in the report set out the rules and procedures for the joint board. They also set out the role of the accountable body, which is likely to be Wokingham, and they also provide a draft governance structure. So executive are asked to recommend to council the establishment of the committee, agree the constitutional arrangements, and delegate to the chief exec to reach a legally binding agreement between the councils prior to the start of the arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to ask a question? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree that there is the strength in numbers, and I'm fully behind the collaboration. I just wondered if you could explain why the leaders have taken the decision not to pursue an elected mayor.
Yeah, can I take that? Is that okay? So the formation of the joint committee provides the necessary governance that you need, in particular, to discharge the functions of the local enterprise partnership. But as you've indicated, it then provides a vehicle and an opportunity to have a more strategic conversation across Pound Berkshire. When you start looking at government's proposals on devolution and the potential of having mayoral combined authorities, that's where government will divest powers down to that combined authority, but it will also require local authorities to divest some powers to that combined authority. It's just simply not required at this stage for the joint committee. So there's no decision required around establishing a mayor or a combined authority. But what it does enable is for Berkshire to have a single conversation with government, to start striking up conversations around devolving powers and funding to the joint committee if that's what it chooses to do in the future. That doesn't mean to say there would be a change of view around a mayoral combined authority. That's something that is for a later date if the 6 councils choose to pick up that conversation again.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? I would just like to ask, are we the first council out of the 6 to go forward with this? Have all the others started to discuss it? How far have we got?
Yeah, so we were the first council to publish our papers, so we're the first one to make the decision at the executive, although I think we'll be the last to take our decision at council, but all others are in process at the moment.
The others are swifter than us then. Okay, I would like to move this recommendation because I'm there and I've been as part of this, and I think it's a really important thing to do. Can I have a second?
Councillor Jeffries to second.
Thank you. I'd like to move this recommendation because I think it's really important that we recognise the government. This government is really in favour of elected mayors and joint authorities. They've got a certain population size that they like to deal with, and I think as single unitary authorities, we won't actually have the clout, I don't think, to actually get into to start getting things on the size of all the different areas and all the different themes we want to work at. So working together like this and putting all our proposals forward and actually meeting as a prosperity board of 6 unitary authorities, we can gain some funding and we can gain recognition for an area, and we can therefore work towards improving the whole of Berkshire and making sure that we get our fair share of that as well. So I think it's really important that we support this, and we are, and it's really a positive thing that I'm there on this board. Well, I'm there as a representative from this council here, and it is a really positive thing that's going on at the moment. So I think I would ask everybody to support this recommendation. Councillor Jeffries, would you like to speak?
I'd like to reserve, Chair.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Jeffries, do you want to speak now?
I'd like to reserve, thank you, Chair.
then I'll wind up, and all I can say is what I said originally. I think this is a really good move forward, and I ask everybody to support the recommendations, which 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Can I ask those in favour to raise their hands, please? Thank you. I'll move on to item 8, which is the Youth Service Strategy Public Consultation, and I ask Gráinne Siggins, the Executive Director for People, to present this item.
Thank you, Leader. The report you have in front of you outlines the approach undertaken to develop the draft youth strategy for Bracknell Forest. The approach has already included to date a significant amount of engagement with young people, previous users of the youth service, agency colleagues and stakeholders, as well as a broader group of members and other stakeholders. The report does outline the key priorities that have been identified so far, but suggests a consultation plan that will further test the priorities that are outlined within the draft document, so that we can ensure that as many people have inputted into the consultation process as possible. The key priorities outlined in the report to date are those identified by the young people themselves, and do include the priority areas of keeping young people safe and intervening early to prevent and reduce harm, to support young people to make informed decisions about their health and well-being, to develop a multi-agency offer to support young carers, to create more opportunities for young people to participate in democratic engagement across their communities, and to invest in the workforce to support youth workers, professionals, to develop pathways for young people to have a career in youth work and early help work. The priorities outlined in the report indicate what young people told us and what we've included in the strategy to date. It is not a comprehensive action plan, and as part of the consultation process that will be further developed, there will be opportunities to think through in detail what those actions need to be against those key priority areas, if they are indeed identified as the ones that young people continue to focus on. So this is very much a draft document for further discussion and consultation. In terms of the consultation plan will be agreed with the Executive Member for Children, Young People and Learning, alongside other members who are feeding into that process presently. The documentation does highlight that the consultation will begin on the 7th of February. However, with the timing of meetings, the consultation process will formally start on the 12th of February, subject to agreement. So there might be some further deferment of that date, as it is going to be agreed by elected members. Once the consultation has been completed, the youth strategy then will be further developed, refined, and brought back to the executive for further discussion and formal sign-off. That document at that stage is intended to include a detailed action plan. So requesting approval to undertake a public consultation on the current draft strategy that you have included in the papers.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions, please? I'd just like to ask a question. This morning I was at Sandhurst School. They had Year 7 had a day of learning about politics, and I was there speaking on being a local councillor and everything, and they were really enthusiastic. So I told them about this consultation would be coming up, and hopefully it will be sent into schools, because I think it's really a good opportunity for them to actually have an input on what they want in their area. So is this one of the things that could happen?
So when we go through the consultation process and plan this week, we'll ensure that that is covered as part of that plan.
I'm sure they'll be so enthusiastic to respond. So thank you. Are there any other questions? Can I ask for someone to move this then, please? Councillor Bailey?
Yes, Councillor Bailey, I'm delighted to move this. Thank you.
Can I ask for somebody to second it?
Councillor Wright, I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm delighted to support this. I've been involved, apprised of developments as this has moved forward. We've met the key officers, and I think it's a really thoroughgoing plan, well thought through. Hopefully what it will come up with will be something of which Bracknell Forest can be proud. I'm pleased to support the recommendations for the following reasons. The proposed strategy supports the Council's plan to ensure engaged and healthy communities. Youth services, a political priority of the Labour Executive, as outlined within our manifesto for the local elections back in 2023, and stakeholder consultation is an important part of the development of the youth strategy, enabling young people, families, members, key stakeholders and wider residents to understand and comment on the proposed strategy. So I'm delighted to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Second, I'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I think it's great to see and intervention with the youth and responding to what they need is obviously good for the rest of the community. So I'm in support of it. Thank you.
I'd just like to say I'm delighted that this is going ahead and it's so early on and it's part of our manifesto. It's a passion of mine and I look forward to the action plan. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bailey, would you like to wind up?
No, thank you, Leader. I've said it all. I'm just delighted this is happening and the speed with which it's happening. Thank you.
Can I ask all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. To item 9, which is Design and Construction Multidisciplinary Consultation Service. Now, a lot of this is on the pink papers, which contains exempt material information. I do not want to close a meeting. I'd rather keep the meetings open whenever possible. So if the questions do go on to the information included on the pink papers, we will have to then go in and close the meeting and ask the press and the public to leave. So please, if you have questions, can we keep them not on the pink papers so we can remain open to all this as a public meeting? Thank you. Is there anybody who's likely to want to ask a question on the pink papers, please? None? Thank you very much. If it happens we get there, then I'll have to close the meeting as if it happens, but I'm sure we can all control ourselves. Right. Can I then please ask, I think it's Kevin Gibbs, to present this to us.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks the approval of the Executive to appoint a procurement plan for a multidiscipline consultancy. This is to support our construction and maintenance work as a call-off contract. It's authorising the plan in terms of both the duration and the contract costs. It replaces a contract which is currently in place and is working well, and actually we're looking to find a new provider as part of our ongoing procurement processes.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Can I just ask a question? It looks as if we've got the internal expertise, then we wouldn't need to go on to the consultant. So we only would call them in if we did not have the if we did not have expertise within our own officers. Is that right?
So, Chair, the challenge for any construction project is that there's a whole series of professionals that need to be called in. If we were to have those professionals permanently on staff, they wouldn't be fully utilised. So by having this call-off contract, we're in a position to be able to call in those expertise where we may only need them for 2 or 3 days of a contract or a piece of work, without having the overhead of having those posts on staff.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can I ask for someone to move this recommendation then, please?
Councillor Jeffries, I'd move these recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask for someone to second it?
Councillor Purnell, a second.
Councillor Jeffries, would you like to speak to the recommendation?
All I'd like to add is that we've read the papers, don't want to go into closed session, but I fully endorse the proposal. Thank you.
Would the seconder like to speak?
I reserve. Thank you, Chair.
Would anyone else? say, this seems to be essential that we do this because we can't afford all these people with not. We certainly can't afford all these great professionals if they're not going to be fully utilised all the time. So, thank you. Councillor Jeffries, would you like to wind up?
No, just to reiterate that I think it's a good use of funds. Thank you.
Can I ask for all those in favour of this recommendation to raise your hands, please? Thank you. And that is the end of tonight's agenda. Thank you very much for everybody that's here.